How goes it, y'all? If you didn't already know, my name is Crysis, and I fucking love movies. It's just something that I've picked up in the past few years, and I just love the hobby, especially because right now I can see 16 free movies per month. And boy, do I ever use those up. With 26 movies seen this month, I'm definitely getting my money's worth, so let's dive right into the reviews, shall we? Starting off the month, I took a shot in the dark and saw She Rides Shotgun, starring Taron Egerton and Anna Sophia Hegger, and boy am I glad I did. This was such a ride from start to finish, though calling it fun might be a bit wrong. She Rides Shotgun was a very good movie, from the story to the acting to the sets that were used. I feel really bad for the young main character played by Anna Sophia Hegger, who was absolutely amazing in her role. Taron Egerton did a great job as the dad who's been through hard times and just wants to see a better world for his daughter. To be honest, the story is kind of predictable, but that just allows you to sit back and enjoy the acting and the action for what it is. It's a great example of less is more when it comes to filmmaking, with a very limited cast of characters, with each one bringing their own spice to the story. A great movie, and one that I would gladly watch again, getting an 8.5 out of 10. The next day, I saw the latest comedy reboot, The Naked Gun, and I just have to say this is easily the best comedy I've seen this year, and one that I honestly think would have been worse if it was rated R. The gags were all fantastic, the story actually made sense, and the amount of random shit going on just worked phenomenally well. The juxtaposition of the straight-laced villain and literally everything else going on in the world made everything that much more hilarious. The entire cast was great, from Liam Neeson filling the shoes of the legendary Leslie Nielsen, to Paul Walter Hauser, to Pamela Anderson, to the ever-villainous Danny Huston. From top to bottom, everyone was just great. My stomach legitimately hurt walking out of the theater for this one after laughing so hard at it. A phenomenal comedy from start to finish, including the mid and end credit scenes, which yes, even this movie has them. It's getting an easy 10 out of 10, and I shudder to think of what fresh hells await me in upcoming comedy movies this year. The next morning, I went and saw The Bad Guys 2, starring Sam Rockwell, Awkwafina, Craig Robinson, Anthony Ramos, and Mark Maron. Now, in terms of animated sequels, this movie was pretty good. It expanded the world, brought in new characters and brought back old ones, and had a story of redemption leading to something greater. While those might seem like the basic tenets for a sequel, very rarely do those all get used in the right ways at the right times. Being a DreamWorks production, the animation is of course stunning, but it never feels like too much at any given time. The whole thing works really well, and all of the characters are given their times to shine, though it feels like the bad guys that aren't Wolf took much more of a back seat this time than in the first one. Other than that, though, the whole thing worked really well, so it'll get an 8 out of 10. Up next was the first screen unseen of the month, and the first one that I've actually guessed incorrectly for the year. East of Wall, a docudrama showcasing a fictionalized version of the lives of horse ranchers in South Dakota. The only reason I'm not going to be too hard on this movie, if I can at least, is because it's set in, and I believe was actually filmed in, South Dakota, my home state. However, that being said, this movie had a lot of stuff working against it at the end of the day. Because it's a docudrama movie, they cast the actual people in the story as the characters in the movie, but that seemed to work against them because I couldn't really resonate with any of the characters. There also didn't seem to be any actual kind of antagonistic force in the movie, aside from almost every single character being their own antagonist, and it just didn't really work for me. The setting was gorgeous, as the Badlands naturally are, but it just didn't really work as a whole for me. Unfortunately, this movie gets a 5 out of 10, so it's time to set it out to greener pastures. The second documentary of the year was next, following the creator of a new term in the English language, Stans, a documentary following Eminem's rise to fame and stardom. Out of the two documentaries I've seen this year, both did a great job of humanizing their subjects, but this one felt different because of the subject, Eminem. Documenting his rise to stardom and the ups and downs that came with it, it was a great insight into the life of one of the best rappers of this century, and it also delved into the lives of a few of his biggest fans, or, as the title would imply, his stans. It was an interesting insight into not only their lives, but also showing how the life, words, and lyrics of a man that most of them had never met before could impact them so much. It also incorporated a good amount of file footage from old interviews and brought in a few surprise interviews that I wasn't expecting for a documentary about Eminem fans. What the hell was Happy Gilmore doing in an Eminem documentary? Honestly, it was just overall a great movie, and it was a movie that I'd be glad to see again if I could, so it'll get a 9.5 out of 10, only getting docked a half point for the length. The first movie in a stretch of 5 movie doubleheaders in 7 days, and the second in a stretch of 14 movies in 10 days, I saw the next screen unseen of the month in Relay, starring Riz Ahmed and Lily James. Now, is the premise for this movie goofy as hell? Yes, and I don't think anyone can deny that. Does it work within the bounds of itself to the point that you actually believe this is something that could actually happen? No, not necessarily, but I like to think it could. Also working well within this premise was our semi-mute protagonist, played by Riz Ahmed. It was a bit strange that he didn't actually speak out loud for about half the movie, but it still worked. A lot of the subplots didn't really work for me until the very end when everything comes together, and that just made the movie drag on for longer than it felt like it had any right to. Another strange thing was the random casting of Victor Garber as a semi-villain in the beginning of the movie, just for him to never show up again. I thought he was going to be a bigger part than he actually was, so I'll be the first to admit that I spent a good amount of time waiting for him to show back up. Other than the length and Victor Garber's role, it was a very good, if goofy, movie, so it'll get an 8 out of 10. The second movie of that first doubleheader was one that I had heard only good things about, and I only have praise for since seeing it. Weapons, starring Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, and Benedict Wong, amongst various other stars. Now, first off, hi, yes, what the fuck? Thank God I saw this in IMAX because it's the first movie that ever made me do the gamer stance when watching a movie in theaters. I was just chilling in my seat, and with about 20 to 30 minutes left in the movie, I was hunched over, my focus fully on the screen. Everyone in this movie did phenomenally. From Julia Garner, to Josh Brolin, to Alden Ehrenreich, to Carrie Christopher, the main child actor for the movie. Everything was just amazing, and even the stuff that I'm not normally a fan of, like the disjointed story and rewinding further and further back, just worked in a way that not many movies can ever do. Easily my favorite horror movie of the year so far, and that's what stuff like Sinners, Bring Her Back, and Together, and it's getting an easy 11 out of 10. Starting the next doubleheader was Strange Harvest, a horror mockumentary, and I'll admit, I would rather see this style of horror movie over another shitty found footage horror movie any day of the week. That being said, if you're going to have people be looking just off from where the camera is, please have them memorize their lines instead of having cue cards behind the camera. It was blatantly obvious with one of the interviewees, and especially when it was a close-up of him, you could see his eyes moving as though he was reading from something and not just speaking off the top of his head. The overall story was great, with just enough questions being answered for it to be a good fake true crime story, with just enough weird shit to make you question whether or not it was real. The acting itself was good, with little glimpses into it being great, though there's only so much you can do with a documentary-style movie. Everything considered, it's a pretty good movie, so it'll get a pretty good 7.5 out of 10. The second movie of that doubleheader was My Mother's Wedding, and it should have stayed as a festival movie. It was okay, but I couldn't really tell you anything that was good about it. Scarlett Johansson's accent was distracting whenever she talked, so I don't understand why you couldn't just cast another big-name blonde British actress because it would have had much of the same effect. I know that this is loosely based on a true story, but the whole conflict being more or less resolved over a single weekend and realistically within 10 hours just did not feel realistic to me. I know that the movie has to movie, otherwise there's no satisfying ending, but it just didn't work for me. As a whole, it was just okay, if slightly worse, so it'll get a slightly worse than okay 4.5 out of 10. The third doubleheader started off with Freakier Friday, and while it was mostly the same movie as the original, this one hit a lot harder because of how much the movie making process has improved for live action Disney movies since 2003. Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan do a phenomenal job acting like teenagers, and Julia Butters and Sophia Hammonds do a similarly phenomenal job in acting like Lohan and Curtis, respectively. The main issues that I had with this movie were what I said at the top, it being the same story and all, and the length, which I feel like the latter was a consequence of the former, with them drawing out certain scenes in order to justify telling the same story just again. I will say, though, it was very nice to see bloopers in the credits. It made it feel like an older Disney movie, and it just made me really happy to see. Overall, it was a very good movie, and I would highly recommend it, so it'll get an 8.5 out of 10. The second movie of the night was a one-night-only event where I saw Red Sonja, a movie that was finally out of production hell, and if I'm behind the production of this movie, I am firing whoever cut together the trailer because this movie was way better than the trailer made it look. While the dialogue did leave a lot to be desired in some bits, it was still an entertaining ride from start to finish. The fights were brutal, the natural landscapes they filmed in were gorgeous, and Matilda Lutz did a great job as Sonja, who made her very strange trademark scale mail bikini her own. However, on the other hand, the fights were also very tame. The CGI that they used for the monsters looked very out of place against the natural backdrops, and while Lutz did a great job, her co-stars, at least in some scenes, left a lot on the table in terms of their acting. I think my favorite thing about this movie, though, was the dichotomy between the villain in search of knowledge and the hero in search of bloody vengeance. I'm always sucker for the intelligent villain that isn't just the hero, but evil. If this movie ever does get a sequel, I'm hoping it gets a bigger budget, a bigger story, and a longer theatrical release than just one day. It was overall a very good movie, especially taking into consideration the 17 years it stuck in production hell, and it gets a justified 7.5. The next movie I saw was Nobody 2, starring Bob Odenkirk, Connie Nielsen, and Christopher Lloyd. As with The Accountant 2 earlier this year, this movie was a great example of what a sequel should be, even if I do think it was less good than the original. It expanded the world while keeping the same main cast of characters and showing them more as opposed to just keeping them in the background for most of the movie. Granted, that last one still kind of happened anyway, but it was still a good movie nonetheless. The action was great, if a bit stilted due to the age of the main characters, but Christopher Lloyd laughing maniacally while shooting a hand-cranked Gatling gun will always be a delight. It did feel rushed, but that may have been a consequence of the 89-minute runtime, so I'm willing to cut this movie a bit of slack for that. Otherwise, it was a good summertime action movie, just, with all the slight negatives mentioned above. Taking everything into consideration, a nice 7 out of 10 is earned. Following that up was a remake of a 1986 cult classic horror movie, Witchboard. First off, a horror movie where I recognized only one of the actors? Oh, hell yeah, indie horror is back. At least for now. Unfortunately, Witchboard is set upon by the worst trope in horror. A white woman is the cause of all of the movie's problems. Granted, this time it's not really her fault, but still, it could have tried to be a little more original. Aside from that, though, it actually was a really good movie. Everyone brought their all to this goofy-ass story, and the movie benefited greatly from it. Jamie Campbell Bower served as a great introduction into the lore and history within the world of the movie, and later as a great antagonist, with very clear motivations that made sense, a stark contrast with some other supernatural horror villains in the past. Is this the kind of movie that would be on sci-fi at 3 in the morning? Sure, but that doesn't mean it's not a great film to be watching at that time, so it'll get a sleepy 7.5 out of 10. The next day, after seeing a disappointing football preseason game, at least for my team, I saw a similarly disappointing movie starring a lot of big-name people. Americana, starring Sydney Sweeney, Paul Walter Hauser, and Halsey of all people. The worst part about being from a real-world location that a movie is set in is noticing the inaccuracies in the setting. license plates, location names, distances, etc. And in this movie, there were quite a few, though most of them were what I just listed above. In terms of the movie itself, while the cast was absolutely stacked with stars and everyone did their best, the script itself was slow and meandering, with chapters that didn't do anything to supplement the one that came before it, almost telling its own story that just barely loosely connected to the one before it. And while this may be a personal thing, the ending didn't feel justified within the context of the rest of the movie. It was just a strange movie with a lot of inaccuracies, and it just didn't resonate with me at all, so it'll fall to a 5 out of 10. Up next was my first Spike Lee movie, Highest to Lowest, a remake of a Kurosawa film and a new adaptation of the book King's Ransom. While I know I was probably not the target audience for this movie, it was still one of the best set in the real world movies that I think I've ever seen. Yes, it's a fictionalized version of New York, but only because of the main cast of characters, not because of superheroes, randomly placed buildings, or anything like that. Denzel Washington was amazing to watch, as always, and Spike Lee did a fantastic job of telling the story through the lens of a powerful black family from New York and the trials and tribulations that come with that power. This movie did a great job in keeping my attention through the whole thing, while also making me wonder who the antagonist actually was, with the payoff being not what I expected, but also exactly the right answer. I will say, though, it felt like the movie forgot about its R rating up until the last 20 minutes or so, when it just threw every kind of foul language at the viewer, which did kind of throw me off. Other than that, though, it was a great movie, so it'll get a 9 out of 10. Following that up was easily the worst movie of the month up to this point, Went Up the Hill. Now, either I was way too tired for this movie, or Went Up the Hill was just dreadfully slow and mind-numbingly boring. In a movie where there are multiple instances of minutes with zero dialogue, just looking longingly out at the admittedly gorgeous landscapes, I was legitimately almost falling asleep in my chair. And yes, I know I'm mostly used to American drama films where something has to be happening every second of the movie in order to keep the audience's attention, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either. The main conflict of the movie left a lot to be desired, and it was just so damn weird. The two main actors, Dacre Montgomery and Vicky Krieps, did okay, but then again, the script itself kept their performances from being anything better than that. It was just such a strange and off movie, and I probably would have been better off taking an hour-and-a-half nap than watching this movie. It's getting a 3 out of 10, and I'm moving on from it before I fall asleep just thinking about it. The final screen unseen of August brought me back to 1932 to see Eden, with yet another stacked cast of characters. A story of 9, soon 10 people on a single island with varying personalities and levels of determination to win. Ah yes, what could possibly go wrong? For real though, this was a very well told story, based on the stories told by the surviving members of the very real experiment that occurred back in the 1930s. My main issue with the movie though, and it's fairly obvious from the get-go, was the accents. For Jude Law, Vanessa Kirby, and Daniel Brühl, their accents were great. But for Ana de Armas and Sydney Sweeney, their accents kept slipping between their natural accents and some made-up one, or between German and British, respectively. This was the only thing that kept taking me out of the movie, which is kind of a problem with such a small cast of characters. Other than that, though, it was a solid story, with some fantastic camera work and methods of showing us everything that was happening rather than just telling us. And for that, it'll keep from slipping off the edge to anything lower than an 8.5. Ending this long stretch of movies was The Knife, and boy did the title cause way too many issues for the family in this movie. And while this movie is definitely going on the list of movies where the more I think about them, the angrier I get, that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. In fact, it's the exact opposite, and it's more a case of movie has to movie than anything else. The whole movie probably wouldn't have happened if the family had just told the damn truth, but then we wouldn't have had the movie in the first place. All of that being said, almost everything else about the movie was solid. The story, the acting, and of course, the fact that it's set in a single location over a single night. Even more props go to the director, Nnamdi Asomugha, as it's his first ever directing credit, and it was a fantastic start. I hope to see more hits from this guy as his career progresses, though I would ask him to invest in a Steadicam or even just a tripod, as the amount of shaky cam footage throughout this movie did start to make me nauseous toward the end. Everything considered, it's an easy 7.5 out of 10, and that's the whole truth about it. Up next, I celebrated my birthday with one of the stupidest movies I have seen in a hot minute, and that's saying something. Primitive War, which I spent $15 of AMC Rewards money to see. Is the premise goofy as hell? Absolutely. Does it still work? Yeah, pretty much. Dinosaurs in the Vietnam War is something that realistically should not work. But the way this movie deals with it and explains why it's happening is just so damn goofy, and that's what makes it work for me. The design of the dinosaurs is the closest to reality that we have theorized because they actually had feathers instead of the scaly design that was popularized by the Jurassic Park movies. However, it was difficult to see the dinos most of the time due to the majority of the movie being set at night, so it was just very dark and damn near epilepsy-inducing due to the amount of flashes due to gunfire, flashing lights, and other random shit that was just very bright in the midst of almost pure darkness. If not for that, it would be a lot better, but it was difficult to see most of the time, and the other times I couldn't watch because of the flashing. Everything put together made this just slightly better than okay, so it'll get a happy 6 out of 10. I wish I had skipped out on the next one and should have taken future me's advice when I said, honey, don't see this movie, which is the movie I saw, by the way. I'm sorry, that was awful. But I mean, come on. I swear, I've seen porn videos with better plot and acting than this movie, which it basically was for about a sixth of its 88-minute runtime. It's insane to think that a movie with the quality of actors in it like this could do so little with literally any of its cast. Chris Evans? Easily the best part of the movie, but he's hardly in it. A charismatic antagonist who you enjoy watching, even if it is just to see him dealt with by the protagonist, but nothing ever comes of his storyline. The whole movie felt like it could have been an email or a limited series with more development of the story, but as it stands, it was just boring, with very few laughs and a third act where they didn't know what to do, so they just threw something at the wall, but it did not stick. A very meh movie, and not in a good way, earning a 4 out of 10. Next up was a movie that released originally in February, but was re-released by A24, this time in English, Zha II. Oh man, where to begin with this? Zha II's only flaws were that it was slightly too long and that I saw it in English, but that last one is my fault, so I can't really fault the movie for it. The story was incredible, building on what was given to us in the first movie, and picking up almost instantly after the first movie left off. The animation was stunning, and the giant fight scenes were super easy to follow, even with 7,000 things happening at once. The entire cast brought their A-game, even in some of the goofier bits, but that just made it even better. The emotions were running high, and even though I'm going to have to wait a bit longer, I can't wait for what comes next. It's getting a 9.5, and I'm just hoping the next one doesn't take another 6 years to come out. The next day, I trusted a decent trailer and walked into Trust, starring Sophie Turner. And damn, poor Sansa really can't catch a break, can she? For real though, this movie was almost exactly what you would expect from the trailer, but it's not terrible. The way that they kept us on edge, from the tension with the rising water to the potential harm of faulty wiring, was just amazing. I do wish they had shown us more of Lauren's backstory and shown us her becoming America's sweetheart, their words, not mine, instead of just telling us and expecting us to care about her because she's the protagonist. I mean, I do care what happens, but that's only because she's the protagonist. The acting was okay, if a lot over the top, from everyone except for Sophie Turner, which threw me off whenever a character that wasn't her was on screen. Overall, it was a fun time killer, but that's about it, so it'll get a 6.5. The next movie was an early access screening of The Roses, the latest adaptation of the book The War of the Roses, and holy hell, this was a riot. The Roses is a great example of something that could have been taken way too seriously and been more of a drama, but it was a fantastic showing of what can be done when you just have fun with a movie. Though it went for more shock humor with over-the-top commentary from the characters, it still worked within the realm of the movie. The banter, the toxic relationship between Theo and Ivy Rose, our two protagonists played by Benedict Cumberbatch and Olivia Colman respectively, the pranks that were played on each other, everything worked so well. The only thing that was off-putting was the over-reliance on the shock value humor, as it did leave a lot to be desired in terms of normal jokes and gags that could have been used. It was still a fantastic movie from start to finish, though, don't get me wrong, so it'll get a 9.5. Kicking off the last doubleheader of the month on the second to last day of August was a new crime thriller, Caught Stealing, starring Austin Butler and Zoe Kravitz, amongst other big stars. Now, fun is definitely a word that could be used to describe this movie. Is it fun for the characters in the movie? Definitely not. Is it fun for the viewers? Yeah, I would say so. Austin Butler brought emotion to a role that could very easily have been heartless and careless, and each of the individual antagonists is memorable in their own rights, even if they only get a few scenes each. I will say, though, that it felt a bit rushed at times, despite the runtime of an hour and 47 minutes. Another thing that annoyed me was the amount of stereotypes that this movie used in order to get where it needed to go. I won't say here which ones because it's pretty big spoilers, but it would have been nice to have a movie about different criminal groups that didn't use some of the most obvious tropes in the history of filmmaking. Other than that, though, it was a really solid movie, so it'll catch an easy 8 out of 10. Finishing that doubleheader was a movie that had been on my radar for quite some time, the Toxic Avenger remake, starring Peter Dinklage, Kevin Bacon, and Elijah Wood. 10 out of 10, moving on. Nah, not really. It felt a little tame, weirdly enough, for how much they were hyping up how messed up it was, but it was still an enjoyable ride from start to finish. I will say, I think my favorite thing about this movie is that it never took itself too seriously. From Peter Dinklage as the title character, to Kevin Bacon as the villain, even to Elijah Wood as the mildly villainous henchman, it was over-the-top acting from everyone in a way that made sense. Even Julian Kostov was great as one of the main antagonists in the movie, though I didn't even know it was him until I saw the credits. It was just a movie full of goof shit, and that's okay, so it'll get a 7.5. I really wish that I could say that August went out with a bang, but it was more like a pathetic whimper, as for the last movie of the month on the last day, I caught Run, and that's what I should have done as soon as the movie started. Like, holy shit, this was bad. Like, bad. I'm sorry, but if I'm seeing an alien invasion movie, I don't care about the human drama about a woman running away from her wedding day of. When the characters try to be smart during the movie, they get thwarted by stupid shit every time. And it just makes you wonder why they even tried in the first place. It's also never explained how the aliens got to the main characters so quickly, despite the characters being in the middle of nowhere when the aliens are shown to only be hitting major areas. Plus, the alien design is kept hidden for the first half hour of the movie, despite it being prominently featured in the poster and the trailer, which just feels dumb. The CGI and other VFX looked just plain bad, and it felt like the first draft of a movie that could be better, if only slightly, after a few iterations of the story. Everything in mind with this one, it's gonna sit at a 1.5, easily the worst of the month. In the month of August, I saw a total of 26 movies for an average rating of 7.2. I walked into 3 of those movies not knowing what I was seeing, with those being East of Wall, Relay, and Eden. I ended up spending $69.25, nice, while saving nearly 4 times that at $259.08. I fucking love A-List. Once again, not sponsored, but also once again, I would love to be. Anyways, to give a brief recap of what I saw in order of quality according to me, we had Weapons at 11, The Naked Gun at 10, Stan's Zha II and the Roses at 9.5, highest to lowest at 9, She Rides Shotgun, Freakier Friday, and Eden all tied at 8.5. The Bad Guys 2, Relay, and Caught Stealing in a 3-way tie at 8. Strange Harvest, Red Sonja, Witchboard, The Knife, and the Toxic Avenger in a 5-way tie at 7.5. Nobody 2 standing alone at 7. Trust Alone at 6.5. Primitive War at 6. East of Wall and Americana tied at 5. My Mother's Wedding at 4.5. Honey Don't at 4. Went Up the Hill at 3. And last and certainly least, Run at 1.5. As always, if there's any of these movies that you'd like a full review on, please let me know in the comments, and I'll see what I can remember about them. With everything tallied up, I've now seen a total of 144 movies this year, with 143 of them being in theaters. Though technically it is still 144 because I did see the K-pop Demon Hunter sing-along thingy in August, but I'm not counting that one because I already saw it on streaming, and yeah, now I'm just rambling. If I see everything in September that's on my list, it should be another long month, so I'll see y'all then. Until then, I'll see you in the next one. And who knows, maybe you'll see something that I saw. Or not. I'm a movie geek, not a cop. Regardless, happy viewing.